Hello, hello, everyone. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can see me. Clap 3 times if you're loving this free food. It's not really free because we pay for it. Just kidding. I'm just joking. I'm Dr. Flo, and I am your humble servant and EEO. Thank you for being here for our Kindred Spirits. We're excited to bring to you a very intersectional, unique approach to art, but also focusing on this notion of service and being part of the military. So, Adams State University Grizzlies, without further ado, please help me welcome Peter Evan Costas, Assistant Professor of Art, to talk about investigating memories through service.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you so much, Dr. Flo and Dr. Schneider, for inviting me in to do this talk. I'm really excited to show you guys a little bit about my work. A lot of what you'll be seeing through this is going to be my photographic work I've been doing for several years now. Probably almost 10 years we're going on now, but I'm going to grab that clicker real fast. Cool. Appreciate it. My name's Peter Evan Costas. I'm a pretty new professor here. I got here in August, and I really love the area so far. It's really, it's been an interesting place for me to change. I came from Chicago. I spent 8 years in Chicago. I did my undergrad at Columbia College Chicago, and then grad school at the Art Institute of Chicago. And that was a really interesting experience that I'll talk about a little bit here. But it's been interesting going from like a massive city to, fairly small town. And coincidentally, a lot of the memories that have been following me, both from the service and, my life in general, seem to be a little louder here, I guess because it's so quiet. So it's been an interesting thing I've been dealing with. I also have tinnitus too, like ringing in the ears, and that's super pronounced here. But so before I get into it, I am a veteran. I enlisted in the United States Navy in 2011. Before that, I was kind of involved. I tried to go in when I was 17 and ended up finishing high school. So I spent by the time I got out at 23, I'd spent about 6 years involved with the Navy. I volunteered for submarine service kind of right away. I wanted to do something unique, but also difficult. I kind of wanted to challenge myself, and I think at the time when I was 18, thinking about this word belonging, I think I really was looking for a community that I could feel a new belonging with, but something that also was super challenging and difficult to kind of be a part of, right? And submarines is one of those communities within the military that is considered really kind of an exclusive community. It is an arduous assignment, so when you first even get your orders, they literally tell you you're about to do one of the most arduous assignments in the military. And so maybe that should have been a little bit of a warning to me, but 18-year-old self thought, wow, this is super cool. So I got out at 23, so I was in from 18 to 23 active duty, and I was on fast attack submarines in the Pacific. I was stationed in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which is a pretty cool place to be stationed, but I would spend anywhere in port, we would spend anywhere from 80 to 120 hours a week in the boat, in the submarine. So most of the Navy, they refer to their vessels as ships. Submariners tend to say boat. So if you hear me saying boat, I'm talking about the submarine. And so I spent a gargantuan amount of time in this submarine as a pretty young guy, right? And it's kind of strange being a professor now, right? Where there are quite a few non-traditional students, which I'm happy to see, but I would say the vast majority of my students are probably within that 18 to 23 age range. And trying to think back to when I was that age, basically being essentially stuck underwater with a bunch of guys, because when I was in, it was all male. And so it sort of honestly like morphed my idea of college. I think at that time I don't want to say I didn't hate the idea of college, but I was totally opposite of it. I didn't think I would ever go to college. I thought I didn't really understand why people went to it. And it didn't really become something that I became interested in until well into my service. This image is from 2017, so this is kind of like when I got out in 2016. This is like my first kind of year getting out and dealing with a lot of the memories of being submerged, right? I spent years literally underwater. I was a sonar technician on submarines, so my job was to literally listen to the ocean and everything in it. By the time I'd spent about 2-3 years in, I could probably basically identify certain kinds of fish and dolphin just purely from sound. I could identify the difference between, a merchant trading vessel versus a warship, just by the way it sounds. So I've spent about roughly, I think I counted at the end of my service, about 13,000 to 14,000 hours on watch as a sonar technician. And so that was honestly, a really cool part of the job for me, to be able to listen as a job, right? To be able to listen instead of, I feel like most jobs, and even like what I'm doing right now, I spend most of my days talking to students maybe. But, it's a lot of speaking, and I think it was an interesting time to be so young and have a job where it was kind of my job to, sit down and listen for a while, and analyze what I'm listening to and really think about what I'm listening to. And you guys might be thinking, well, where does this relate to photography? In a lot of ways, I view my photographic practice as a form of listening. I'm much more interested in listening first and photographing after than I am sort of taking the picture first, right? And we're in an age where most of us have cameras in our pocket, right? We have phones. We're really used to taking pictures. My time in service, anytime I was in port, we had an armed sentry at the pier, and they had a box there, and we'd have to put our phones in a box and lock it in a box before we even entered the boat, crossing the gangway into the boat. So no phones on the boat, no pictures, no emails, no social media. Within my first 2 months on a submarine, I had learned of one of my peers from submarine school getting 10 years in prison for just posting something like some stupid picture on Facebook of the submarine. So there was a real fear of photography when I was in the service. There was, and that's maybe one of my biggest regrets. I mean, I'm glad I didn't go to jail, but, I don't have a lot of pictures from my time in service. I have a few, and they're real goofy, and I excluded them from here, but, I don't have a lot of pictures to show because really that was photography was basically forbidden in my time in service. And I thought it was kind of interesting. In my last 2 years in, I became really interested in using a camera. The military has a lot of different people in it, a lot of different experiences, a lot of different voices in the military. But, and I won't say mine was totally one-sided, but I would say I spent 5 years active duty, and at least 4 of those were pretty miserable, to be honest. I don't want to sell the military on one end, but I also don't want to, lie to you guys that it's an amazing experience all the time. A lot of it is incredibly difficult, both mentally and physically. And a lot of those things that I experienced do follow me today. Some of those things being good, positive experiences that I think helped me with confidence, with being able to express myself as an artist even. But a lot of things that really kind of follow you, and memories that follow you whether you want it to or not. Involuntary memories you wake up with, right? And so I get out and I'm kind of grappling with this idea of like, wow, I'm free. I just spent 5 years of basically being, in my kind of prime, trapped in basically an underwater prison. And now I'm free and I'm in college and I used the GI Bill, so I didn't have to work, which was amazing. The cool thing about the GI Bill is they pay you like a stipend while you're going to school. And so I was able to fully focus on my studies, and that was amazing. And I was in this art school, this really heavy photography program, and a lot of my peers there, they're younger than me, but they're working with things that they want to show, things they feel they can express, and I have all these memories of my time in service that I would like to express and talk about and photograph, and I can't do that legally. I can't. A lot of the things we went and did were way overseas in places I can't talk about, and I guess I could theoretically talk about it, but there's a real threat of going to prison for sharing things, or possibly, damaging national security a bit. And so I started working with the idea of fiction in expressing my experience. So I still want to express the emotional impact of being a submariner, or submariner, however you say it, but, and I wasn't really so interested in like this Tom Clancy kind of like describing it tactically or going into the super fine details of what this is, because I feel like in a lot of ways, like those things can be even more exclusive, right? Like you kind of have to already know a little bit about that community to even understand that story to an extent, even though those are great books. But I was more interested in having this emotional connection with people, right? Because I'm getting out of a really niche community in the military and getting out into urban Chicago civilian life and feeling very disparate from my community, or really any community. I really felt really kind of emotionally alone at that time. And so I am using my photographic practice at this time to describe a kind of mythology of my own life, right? Because that's sort of what a lot of the submarine experience felt like for me, where, hey, I know I did this stuff, right? I know I experienced it, yet even if I tell other people, they might not believe it, or B, can't really comprehend it because they haven't had the experiences there to understand that. And I think a lot of different people have different experiences like that in life, right, that maybe don't have anything to do with military or submarine service. But a lot of these photographs you're seeing are done via cyanotypes and calotypes. It's an alternative process of photography from the late 1800s. So it's actually using really old photographic processes to experiment with image making. And the cool thing about these processes is anytime you make them, the image is totally original. So there's no way to copy this again. There's no way to recreate it totally as it is. And so another thing I like about these is they change over time, and I'll show you a couple images later on, but those old processes change as time goes on, kind of as memories do. Another thing I got interested in grad school mostly was 3D modeling and using kind of digital programs to literally create these ideas of kind of what my service felt like. So I used a lot of satellite imagery in these and changed these images so that they would kind of show what it sort of feels like to be deployed on a submarine, right? Like I can't talk about where I went and what we did, but I can talk about the strangeness of being like the farthest you can possibly be as a human, because, right, you're in the middle of the ocean. Submarines don't use shipping lanes. They go and do spaghetti-like traverses through the ocean so we can't get detected. And being in this totally kind of foreign place, the only thing you can see around you is just black waves. But your satellite imagery is telling you, oh, you're close to this place or whatever. And kind of feeling like really involved with the world as a map, but also totally removed from the world too, right? You don't have any access to your life back home. You can't really talk to your family. You can email people, but you can only email them once every 35 days, and it's just a paragraph, and if any of the words are kind of light off the system, they'll totally cancel your whole email. So I didn't really use that a whole lot. But using 3D modeling as a way to sort of explore these ideas of being at sea and being sort of like almost lost at sea, feeling lost in this mass abyss, but also part of this community that's really difficult to describe. And so this is not a submarine, this is a tall ship, but I'm really experimenting in this with how I can change an image, how I can sort of morph things to describe that emotional experience of being a submariner. Because I was a sonar technician and I usually dealt with sound a lot, I really got interested in making sound in graduate school, so I started blacksmithing, working with steel, and these are some examples of some experimental instruments I made out of steel. So these are, I didn't include the audio this time, but if you guys are interested, I can show you some of my audio that I'm trying to basically recreate a lot of the sounds that I heard as a sonar technician, because those memories of those sounds are kind of embedded in my experience. This is called a wet plate collodion process, and this is another really old photographic process, mostly used during the American Civil War. So this is on like a copper plate. It's not really repeatable. Again, it's kind of an original piece, but really cool, direct positive, using those old cameras where you have to put the hood over you. It looks kind of crazy, but this was a cool process, kind of using materials and processes that veterans from a long time ago used, and I really, I love connecting with history myself because I kind of view history, present, future as all kind of being a, continuous story that eventually, pretty soon I'll probably be historical if I'm not already, right? Sometimes being a professor makes me feel a little old, but so I lived really close to Lake Michigan in Chicago, right on the lake, and I thought of it as like a really weird place to be right after being in service in the Navy, where we were out, like way out in the middle of the Pacific, where there's not any landmass or anything for hundreds, if not thousands of miles. Lake Michigan is not that, but it does have this super flat, very little waves, but you can't see the end. You can't see Michigan on the other side. And so sometimes waking up every day to that was a really bizarre experience for me, like having this, I used to call it like simulation water. It just didn't really feel real a lot of the time. But Lake Michigan became a huge metaphor for me, for my memories and my time in service. And I used to basically go chase a lot of the storms that would happen across the lake. And I started reading Homer's Odyssey at this time and became really interested in the idea of people who chase storms and kind of chase those dangers. Because I think most people think of sea travel as just getting from one place on land to another, and that was not really my experience. So Yeah, this image is real dark on this screen, but kind of doing more of those, experimenting with storm photography. And then these next two images are going to be kind of performative for me. So I got really interested in performance or performing emotion for the camera. So not really performance as in like having an audience, but using the lens as a kind of audience. And a large part of my family is Ukrainian, so this is actually made on the night right before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I was trying to use my photographic art as a way to sort of rebel against those things happening, right? Seeing something that I now have a direct, family connection to, and as a veteran feeling like I do kind of want to go over there and do my part, but also knowing like, well, maybe my part of that is sort of done, right? Like there's a weird sort of belonging there, right? Where I'm sort of this disparate, should I go over there, should I not? I'm in the middle of school, I've got family here. So there was a lot of grappling with that, and I basically used my artwork as a engine to grapple with those ideas and feelings, and it kind of saved myself from going over there, because I don't think it would have been a good thing if I went over there, but that was during that. And then this image is kind of a self-portrait, but not really. I'm sort of making myself into a lot of the emotion that I felt of feeling like a mythological creature almost, right? Like feeling like I can't really describe myself to you unless I use some kind of mythology to describe it, right? Because I can't really, it's kind of a crazy photo, right? But it's, a lot of the emotions that I sort of keep in here really are that, right? Like we all have our masks, we have our things we put on, and our professionalism that we exude, but sometimes there's some really messy stuff down there, that was sort of behind that stuff. And so I wanted to sort of try making a photograph that is entirely constructed out of emotion. So that's kind of leading me up to this. Oh yeah, so I still have my cheese prints. So I wanted to show you guys these. These are cyanotypes. So when I was talking about photographs that change, I printed these on slices of Swiss cheese about 3-ish years ago, and they still exist. But they've changed almost every month since then. It's pretty gross too. I got really sick from this process. I'll never do it again. But technically, cyanotypes have a trace amount of cyanide in them, and if exposed to a strong acid, they can separate from iron, which can make it dangerous. I didn't think that would happen, but by doing this, I think the lactic acid in the cheese was just strong enough to release a little bit of the cyanide gas, and I got really sick. But I also thought it was an interesting metaphor, as I'm really far from the time people fought in World War I, but a lot of veterans from World War I or those earlier wars did have to deal with these insanely toxic gases, right? And so it sort of became this almost living, performative metaphor for me to sort of, experience that just on a really tiny level. And I also became really interested in this idea of a rotting memory. I know it sounds kind of gross, but I'm not one that necessarily believes memories are always solid, right? Like, things happen and we have a lot of different emotions that are tied to those memories that I think emotion can kind of mend and mold our memories, right? Because I think in a lot of ways our brains want to try to remember things in a way that we want to, right? Even if they're a bad memory, we might try to change part of it so that we, feel a little bit okay with it, right? Or maybe try to, sort of give ourselves some leeway, and that was something I experienced a lot in my time in service. So I was interested in photographs that literally did that. And now I'm here, and these are some of my great sand dune photos, but I really, part of the reason I came here, I mean, I love being at Adams State, and I love, a lot of parts of this valley, but really the sand dunes for me, as far as this work is concerned, became this massive metaphor for life. In a lot of ways, they feel the most similar to me as the ocean felt, as this just really, especially at night, this really dark space that almost has no bearing. And so I'm really interested in sort of trying to photograph the San Luis Valley as if it's an ocean. So that's another project I'm working on right now. The main thing I wanted to show you guys here is a documentary photo project I'm working on in Monte Vista at Home Lake Veterans Center. Maybe some of you guys know about it, maybe not, but it's not too far from here. It's about a 20-minute drive just outside of Monte Vista. And it's one of the most unique veterans centers in the country, believe it or not. It's been around since the late 1800s, so I believe 1891 is when the first veterans showed up there. And these, a lot of those first veterans were from the American Civil War. Some were from the Spanish-American War. But a lot of those services that we now have for veterans, and it could still use some improvement, but a lot of those services back then in 1891 were totally unheard of to be, veterans kind of for a long time, I think, have been, a lot of communities experience this, but I think specifically in America, I think a lot of veterans from a lot of different wars experience, getting into a community and then being kind of, a lot of it's related to a machine. You get into the machine, you get into the gears, and then you just get spat out, and that's it. The machine keeps going, but now you're kind of without that, And so there is like some effort to have us, assimilate back into society, but I would say it's a long road. And so part of a lot of what you'll see some portraits of veterans that I've made at Home Lake. Most of the veterans here are older, at least. I think the youngest one is 58, I believe. But a lot of these veterans have super varied experiences throughout the military. So, some of them are Vietnam guys, some of them are Korean. There's even a few World War II veterans, which is, I'm really hoping to interview them soon because they're, getting close. And then, some of the guys are even as young as like the Gulf War. So there's a huge range of experiences here. And I'm basically, in a way, just kind of unscripted talking to these guys. I'm not a journalist, I'm an artist, so I don't want to go in with these scripted questions, and I'm not trying to elicit a certain response from them. I just want to hear whatever they want to talk about, because in a lot of ways, I view their experience kind of, it's like looking in the future, sort of. I'm not necessarily going to be these guys, but, what was so different from them, 60 years before than I'm going to be in 60 years, right? Or if I make it to that, but even 40 years from now, right? So I'm kind of looking at these guys sort of almost like I'm looking into a mirror, which is kind of a tough thing to grapple with, and I don't feel super connected to all of them, but I do see a lot of similarities in what they experienced throughout the years and what I'm currently experiencing. And it's totally different. I mean, like, I'm a millennial, right? I was born in '93. I have this kind of, my generation is like the snowflake generation, and I'm a veteran, so it's sort of, it's a different thing. But we still have a lot of similar experiences that are kind of blanketed in different formats throughout our service. And a lot of these guys have talked about, it's either they had a miserable time in the military and then got out and it was kind of sort of subsided, or a lot of times they loved their time in and got out and got kind of, felt like they got mistreated by the American public. And I don't want to make this too negative, but there is I feel like veterans experience or witness a lot of cruelty in different forms. And there's a lot of cruelty in the military. A lot of things that happen that potentially stay with people, whether they realize it or not. And then even some of the quieter, less noticeable cruelty after getting out, where it's difficult to assimilate, it's difficult to talk to people, it's difficult to, we're kind of used to being really honest in the service, being really blunt and just kind of saying how we feel. And, not all the time, but a lot of times when you get out, that's a huge barrier, potentially, to assimilating back into society. And a lot of the Vietnam veterans I've talked to experienced, a lot of hatred from the American people after being drafted and going to fight in Vietnam kind of involuntarily. They didn't have a choice. And then coming back home to a public that basically hates them, right? And these guys are still dealing with these memories 40, 50 years later. Those memories are still, I would say, almost more poignant to them than what happened to them 10 minutes ago. And I'm kind of looking at them like, wow, am I gonna be bothered by these memories for 40 years from now? Like, is this, what is happening? And sort of thinking about, so this place, Home Lake, a lot of veterans from the entire country come here, actually, believe it or not. Some are even as far as Canada. Some guys are like expats and have come back to the States to specifically go to Home Lake. It's one of the, really one of the nicest facilities for older veterans in the US and one of the last ones. One of the weird things about it, though, too, is that a lot of the outside, I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but a lot of the outside of this facility is kind of abandoned looking, right? Like it's sort of this, a lot of derelict historical buildings that actually can't come down because they're historic. But these guys sort of feel like they found this community or this belonging together in their varied experiences, but yet are still kind of, detached from society a little bit. So all these shots are all done on film, so it's all analog, medium format photography, and some of it is about the grounds, and some of it's about the veterans themselves. And this is an in-progress project I'm working on, but I'm hoping to really kind of have this connection with these veterans for a long time. I'm hoping to be here for a while and sort of see how this project develops over time. I think time is a really important part of photography and life in general. But it's also interesting to be part of a community that I also feel at odds with sometimes too. Like, not all of my experience as a military veteran was great. Some of it I absolutely hate. But I also feel exceptionally proud of what I did and the things that I helped to do for this country. But it's not all clean, So it's some of these communities that we feel a belonging to are not always. It's not always positive. It's not always a big welcoming hug, I guess. And that can be part of it. But I guess in a lot of ways I've learned from both being in and being out that belonging might be sort of this kind of double-edged thing. And I'll finish up here in a second. I'm pretty sure this was a ghost I captured. I'm not sure. But I don't know what that light is. There was no windows around me at all. I don't know. So that's another part of this community is these guys are really close to the end of their life there. And a lot of them spend the end of their life there. So that's another part of this project that's, kind of feels intense for me. It's, and I thought this guy's reflection was really interesting. He was a Vietnam veteran. The reflection on the table, in my opinion, doesn't even look like, it almost looks like a younger version of him. So that kind of, stuck with me. But, all right, so I know we're kind of short on time, but I wanted to do a little exercise with you guys because I'm assuming most of you have a massive library of photos on your phone, or at least some. I know I have like 20,000 photos that I almost never look at. But if you'd like to get with your table here or a partner or someone around, without looking at your phone, try to remember a photograph in your phone that is maybe impactful for you, maybe something that holds a lot of importance. It doesn't need to be too intense or anything. Maybe it's something of family, friends, a place you really like. But try to really think about that photo in depth. And with your partner or with your group, try to describe that photograph as detailed as you can. So talk about color, talk about line, talk about who's in the photograph, what is in the photograph in specific areas. Try to get as detailed as you can without looking at that image. Spend a few minutes doing that. And then maybe if your partner or whoever you're working with wants to write those down or just take note of them, after you've sort of tried to describe that photograph, look at your phone and see if there's differences or similarities with what is actually in that photograph. And this is sort of a exercise in remembering and how photographs aren't always how we remember them, right? Sometimes they are more geared towards trying to elicit an emotion in you than trying to tell a story verbatim. Does this make sense? You guys, so I'll give you a few minutes if you want to try that, and then maybe we'll see if anybody has some interesting discoveries.
So my daughter and I,
Yeah.
she's 23 now, she was 8 or 9, we created the Chicago Cubs snowman.
Wow, okay.
And we were very detailed. I had we're still playing men's baseball, we had blue cleats, we used blue spray paint to make the lines.
Wow.
I think we actually used, I found an old kid's glove like that.
Wow.
We sent it in to a magazine and they actually printed it.
Really? Wow. That's cool.
But I've always had it on my phone because obviously being a fan,
Cool.
my daughter and I did Cubs convention like 9 years in a row.
Wow. That's
It's
awesome.
kind of a symbol. She's always a little
Yeah.
girl.
Wow, that's awesome. So blue cleats and
What?
you said blue cleats?
I think I actually had actual blue baseball.
Okay, wow, cool.
He's a Sox fan, so
Yeah, I'm the devil for him, I guess. But yeah.
Oh, because they're both in the same area.
Yeah, but it's rough.
Well, it's hard to even be a Rockies fan here.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I'm
that's the
saying?
same kind of pain I feel like as White Sox. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is.
But-
It's tough.
Yeah.
I'm a Toronto fan.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Blue Jays? No way. Cool.
Some Audrey's and
Yeah, that's cool. I will
I
say
love their
the.
stadium. I love their,
Oh really?
You know,
Cool.
it's beautiful.
Nice.
I'm looking for it.
It's like one of the first highways I've ever been on that's like 7 to 10 lanes deep.
I see it all the time.
I will say that Rockies dinger is pretty cool. That
Yeah.
mascot, that's like one of the coolest.
It is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like the Colorado, I think has some pretty cool, like the Nuggets.
Yeah,
You know, so you have some kind of thoughtful,
Yeah, for sure.
I guess they're mascots. Pretty cool if like Denver Broncos were like Buffalo, FC Buffalo, you know, big kind of cool logo.
Oh, cool. Nice. Where are the blue cleats at?
Oh yeah.
We'll see. Maybe you remember.
Right there, right in the bottom.
Oh, there. Okay, cool.
Which
Oh,
they
awesome. Very cool. Nice. Cool. Well, that's interesting. You remember the thing that's like right at the bottom of the frame. It's almost out of it. That's cool.
Well, part of the reason I remember them is I went to use them next spring and they were ruined. They were all,
Oh, from the snow? Gotcha. That's pretty cool.
you too.
How am I doing on time? Oh, okay. Should I finish up right now?
If you want to give you some, like, some might leave soon, but
Okay.
yeah, he's a
Okay, cool. All right, sweet. Thanks.
I've never been in Africa.
Hey everybody, so we are getting close to time here. I don't want to rush you guys if you want to finish up, but we are at 12:50. I guess if you guys want to continue doing it, go ahead, but does anybody have any interesting things that came up before we go? I killed. Annalise?
One observation, so Anna described her image that meant a lot to her.
Cool.
And she described the things in the image and colors and so on. And just as you were describing beforehand, she just pulled up the image and showed it to me. And a lot of what she remembered in the photo was not actually
Really?
in the photo.
Okay, so very different. So maybe it was mostly a memory there that changed. Okay, cool. So your memory changed the photo. Awesome, thank you. Any others?
There wasn't a lot of describing the photo.
Okay.
For us, it was more like, here's the story of why we took the photo.
Good, okay.
There wasn't any actual descriptors.
Okay,
It was a competition.
that's cool.
We
Well,
didn't do the assignment correct.
but that's still memory, right? You're still, maybe that's even more important, right? Remembering what's outside of the frame. Like a lot of photography is about what's not being seen, right? Because it's a frame we're putting on life. So that's great. Cool. Any last ones? Cool. If not, I really appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much for listening, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. One more round of applause for Peter. All right, so join us in the next 2 weeks. On April 30th, we will have culturally responsive gender-based violence, education, prevention, and response, a student's perspectives and recommendation for Adams State. This will be a panel of sociology students, so join us here, April 30th, same time, same place. Thank you all, and go Grizzlies.